The powerful chief of staff of Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has resigned, unsettling the country's diplomatic efforts at a time of intense negotiations over a possible peace plan. Andriy Yermak submitted his letter of resignation this afternoon after prosecutors searched his apartment as part of an anti-corruption investigation. Earlier, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban travelled to Moscow to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Tonight, President Zelensky's Chief of Staff, Andriy Yermak, bowed to the inevitable after prosecutors searched his apartment as part of a sweeping anti-corruption probe. Mr Yermak submitted a letter of resignation to his boss and longtime ally. President Zelensky framed his resignation against the Russian threat.
Russia
really wants Ukraine to make mistakes. There will be no mistakes on our part. Our work continues. Our struggle continues. We have no right not to see this through till the end. We have no right to retreat or to quarrel. If we lose unity, we risk losing everything. Ourselves, Ukraine, our future.
Andriy Yermak had emerged as a powerful chief of staff and was front and centre in all the recent peace talks with the Americans. His loss will be an unsettling one for Ukraine's desperate diplomatic efforts. Earlier, the leader who's done everything possible to thwart European support for Ukraine made his fourth visit to Moscow. The Russian president praised Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban for what he called his balanced approach to Russia's nearly 4-year assault on Ukraine. Mr Orban promised to keep buying energy from Russia. In Berlin, the German Chancellor said it was vital that the EU get agreement on converting €140 billion in frozen Russian assets to keep Ukraine afloat financially and militarily. Belgium continues to block the so-called reparations loan, as the assets are currently held in a Belgian company. At a memorial in Kyiv's Maidan Square, Ukrainians reflect on a perilous moment. Russia is boasting of new advances at the front, a potential peace plan hangs in the balance, and now President Zelensky's top negotiator has resigned. A young girl mourns the loss of her father. "You promised me you wouldn't cry," her mother tells her. Another woman reflects on the death of her husband.
It's very hard to lose a loved one. It's very hard to see so many people, so many friends and loved ones die defending Ukraine, defending our country in this damn war. Very hard.
Ukraine has suffered many low moments. This must rank among the hardest. Tony Connolly, RTE News.
Well, for more on those developments in Ukraine, we're joined by Donncha Obiakon, who's Professor of Politics at the School of Law and Government in Dublin City University. Donncha, thanks for joining us on 6-1. Could you tell us a little bit more about Andriy Yermak and his important role that he played in the Ukrainian administration?
Sure. Well, the relationship between Andriy Yermak and Volodymyr Zelensky goes back long before Zelensky's election as president in 2019. Trained as a lawyer, he provided legal services for Zelensky's production studio. And then when Zelensky was elected president in 2019, he was first foreign policy advisor and then elevated to chief of staff, the role that he's resigned from today. The bond was therefore personal rather than institutional or party. And he had access, unparalleled access to Zelensky. It was often said that he was the only person who could say no to Zelensky. Because of that, of course, he did concentrate a lot of power around him. He did sideline ministers and indeed parliament. So there will be a lot of people today who will be quite happy to see the back of him because he did hold such power. But he was the familiar face to many negotiators, particularly the Americans. There was almost like a division of labor between the two. Zelensky was the public face, the national symbol, whereas Yermak was the coordinator behind the scenes. And his loss will be deeply felt, definitely, by Zelensky and his administration.
And of course, the timing of his resignation couldn't have come at a worse time. Explain to us the significance of that and the likely impact of it.
Well, there was never going to be a good time for this kind of a scandal to emerge. I mean, this is part of a 15-month investigation called Operation Midas. You can look at it two ways. You can look at it as evidence of long-standing corruption in Ukraine. This goes back to Soviet times and is a feature of most post-Soviet polities, There are others, however, not least in Brussels, who see it as a somewhat a good news story, because this scandal was uncovered by Ukraine's own state institutions. It was the anti-corruption bodies in Ukraine who've uncovered this. So many see this as evidence that Ukraine is able to handle such corruption scandals. But you're right, it's not a great time. Very delicate negotiations taking place, and unparalleled pressure now being applied from Russia in the east, but also from Washington, D.C. In the west to get Ukraine to agree to a deal that perhaps is not in its interest. And in that sense, the reputational damage which a scandal like this does will be capitalized upon by enemies in Moscow and indeed in Washington, D.C.
And Volodymyr Zelensky has said he will move to replace him as soon as possible. What can we expect then in the coming days?
Well, there is a vacuum. It has to be filled. And going forward, Ukraine will try and, as I said, pair up this gap in its administration. There are plenty of people who, of course, will be willing to step into Yermak's shoes. But the real challenge is less domestic. I think, as I said, there's a lot of relief domestically that Yermak is gone. I think the real challenge will be the reputational one that is internationally with the Ukraine's partners as they go forward towards these very delicate negotiations.
All right, Donncha Obiakon, Professor of Politics at the School of Law and Government at DCU. Thanks for joining us on 6-1.